Thanks for listening to the ArtTactic Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Green. In today's increasingly crowded art fair landscape, many fairs can start to feel a bit similar. As someone who visits quite a few of them each year, it's actually pretty rare to walk into a fair where the visitor experience feels genuinely different. But TEFAF is one of those exceptions. Part of that comes from the atmosphere, but even more so from the range of art you encounter as you walk through the fair. One booth might feature contemporary art, the next could be filled with jewelry, and just a few steps later you might encounter some old master paintings. You just never know quite what you're going to come across next. TEFAF Maastricht just wrapped up earlier this month, and TEFAF New York opens in May. To discuss the recent edition at Maastricht, as well as preview the New York Fair, in this week's episode of the podcast, we're joined by Will Korner, Head of Fairs at TEFAF. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Will, thanks so much again for coming on. It's great having you back.
Thank you for the invitation, Adam. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be back. So, looking forward to diving in.
Definitely. Well, we're excited to have you on. So I think a great place to start is the fact that many of our listeners likely have never been to Maastricht, or at least experienced TEFAF there. And I think it's hard to convey what the fair actually feels like. So to start off, can you describe the fair, the scale, the atmosphere, and really what makes the ambiance of TEFAF Maastricht unlike any other art fair?
Well, thank you for saying that yourself. Of course, it's not just the setting. I mean, TEFAF Maastricht is a city in the southern Netherlands on the border with Belgium and Germany, and it's a medieval city. So it's a beautiful place to be for a start. And the fair that we've run there now for 39 years, 39th edition this year. Of course, like any other fair, we bring together all these galleries from all over the world, 277 of them this year, and we have more than 15,000 objects. So it's a huge scale compared to many other fairs. And you move from antiquities, from ancient art to Renaissance painting, because you've got the best old master dealers, the best furniture dealers, the best works on paper dealers, all the way through to 20th and 21st century design and contemporary art. And it's that sort of cross-collecting and that connection between objects, the dialogue between objects, that's the foundation of our fair. And you can see that just, when you come in. So as an experience, you come in, we're very famous for the flower hall at the entrance. And then you're sort of on the central square. And on that central square, you have medieval art. You have medieval art from London and from Chicago with Sam Fogg and Les Lumineuses. You've got the absolute pinnacle of French furniture and sculpture with Galerie Kugel. You have Richard Green also from London, who has the best impressionist paintings in the world. And then you have White Cube. So you have this correlation immediately from the start. Just a couple of things more about it. We are a foundation. TEFAF stands for the European Fine Art Foundation. So on the one side, you've got the fair, you've got the most incredible rediscoveries of a version of the Salvator Mundi, a follower of Da Vinci. You get amazing stories like two Monets, one that came up for auction, another that a gallery has managed to unearth and put them back together. It's the same, different views of the same church and different seasons. You get amazing focused booths, not only in our focus section, where we have, for example, this year, Demistanon, one of the most important design galleries, as you know very well, Adam, but showing a 19th century French realist artist, called Antoine Vollant. But the coolest things for me, from my point of view, is when you see these combinations on a stand. So you have both historic and modern and contemporary art. So you have one of our long-standing exhibitors, Daniel Crouch, the most important map dealer in the world, alongside Michael Hoppen, one of the most important photography galleries, returning to the fair to do a combination of Sohei Nishino, one of Michael Hoppen's photographers from Japan, showing his cityscapes next to antique maps. And there are lots of other stories like that that maybe we can dive into later.
And so TEFAF Maastricht just wrapped up earlier this month. Tell us, how did sales go? And even more broadly, how do you think about what a commercially successful edition of TEFAF looks like, considering the wide range of works for sale compared to maybe a more conventional art fair that just has contemporary art or some other art movement?
Thank you. I mean, it's a super question. I think that the market in general is a lot more diverse and deeper than a lot of people give it credit for, whether that's looking at, the big ticket sales in modern and contemporary art in particular, where people say, this is now in fashion, this isn't in fashion. The market's doing well, the market is not doing well. Old Masters is having a boom. Old Masters is not having a boom. We actually see multiple markets happening simultaneously, and that, of course, really is what encapsulates our fair. So I've said some of the examples of amazing artworks or amazing presentations that we have. In terms of sales, we had one of my favorites was this incredible portrait by Willem Drost, one of the most important of Rembrandt's pupils. That was acquired from Agnes by the Leiden collection. You also have a 14th century marble kneeling monk that was acquired by the Met for 1.5 million. Those Monets I talked about, those have been reserved on for a total sale of 20 million. But I think for me, and I think for the fair in general, it's way more exciting to see, for example, we had a Meissen flute, so an 18th century German porcelain flute that was on sale with Gallery Kugel, one of the galleries I mentioned earlier. And then we have a new gallery joining the fair for the first time. It's a young gallery. They only specialize in Meissen porcelain, in 18th century German porcelain. I mean, I don't know how many fairs can say that they have a gallery only specializing in that. They were in Showcase, which is the new next generation gallery. And they brought a box, and we think, and all the experts looked at the box, and they think that that box is the original box of the flute. And so you have this across, the different areas of the fair. So that kind of engagement, those stories, is really what is so important to us, to our DNA. And when it comes down to success, from a TEFAF point of view, we look at it as what can we do better in every single category. That's the only way to stay at the top. You have to work really hard on every single area. And the way that I approach it, to be honest, is I stay as level-headed as I can during the fair. Otherwise, you go from stand to stand with some people saying, I've had the most amazing sales. Some people saying, it's not going that well. I wait until the 1st of June, which is the application deadline for the following year. And that's when you know whether the dealers have judged it as a success by their own metrics. So to me, I'm still 2.5 months away from really knowing how successful or not successful it was, but it feels pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. So much of the art world's attention and really energy gravitates towards contemporary art. How much of a priority has it been to make sure that contemporary art is a part of the TEFAF experience in recent years?
Well, it's absolutely central to what we're doing. I mean, I think that's sometimes underestimated. I mean, everyone knows we have the best objects in the world from the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, but a third of our fair these days in Maastricht is 20th and 21st century art and design. And it has been for quite some time. And I love this question because I think that the reason why you're asking is just shows that the perception we have tried to shift about this seems to be relatively successful because, I remember when we put White Cube on that corner of the center aisle, which was about 3 years ago now, and everyone said, wow, you have contemporary art at TEFAF. And we went, yeah, we've had it for many years. It's about 90 galleries, which is obviously the size of many art fairs, full stop. And of course, it's so integral to the DNA of dialogue between objects from all over the world in all of these different mediums, and really leaning into that and leaning into, I think, 20th century. I think a lot of people, they talk about modern and contemporary fairs, where mainly they're talking about 21st century fairs, where both Maastricht and New York really lean into the 20th century just as much, which is, of course, where all these museum shows, all so much interest is. And it's essential for us not only to think about this, okay, who's in the fair now? How does it work with the dialogue between the old objects and the new objects? How does it work with the artists themselves specifically requesting and wanting to do projects? Like I mentioned, like Sohei Nishino on Daniel Crouch's stand. But also, you have to be honest with yourself and take that yardstick that other fairs measure themselves. And so that means that we have to go after and get the best of the best, whether it's, White Cube, who I mentioned, or Skarstedt, who brought you can see the perfect combination. They brought Lucas Cranach, so from the 15th century Germany, alongside their Warhols and their other fantastic 20th and 21st century works. You have to go after galleries like Alison Jakes and Grimm and Larkin Erdmann, who are a few of the galleries that joined this year, as well as the best in 20th century Italian design, Rosella Colombari. And you have to think about how the artists themselves want to position themselves alongside the canon, the art historical canon. And that can be even rejecting it, that can be pushing against it. But that is really important to both of our fairs. So I'm really, really glad that you asked the question.
Yeah, of course. So as the art market has softened in recent years, there's been an increasing level, I think, not only of art fair fatigue, but among collectors and galleries, an increased level of selectivity about the fairs that they're choosing to attend or exhibit in. As the head of fairs at TEFAF, how cognizant are you of this trend in the market, and are you taking any specific steps to ensure that visitors and exhibitors continue to show up for TEFAF?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I'm planning, at least 18 months in advance before each fair. How can we make sure we stay at the top? How can we make sure that we differentiate ourselves? And the most important thing is we have to be very clear for what we stand for. And I think, that DNA we've talked about, like the mix, the dialogue between objects, the medieval setting in Maastricht. But in a crowded fair landscape, you have to be clear on what you stand for, what people can expect. And so we lean into that sort of depth of expertise. A lot of these dealers are the absolute experts at what they do. And that might be, as I said, the Meissen porcelain dealer, or it might be a works on paper dealer for a 20-year period, or it might be a German furniture of the 18th century or whatever it is. So we really have to lean into that and share the stories of those exhibitors, of their specialty, so that people remember and want to come back for this unmatched sort of breadth across time and cultures. So we first of all, we have to lean into that identity, and that those are some of the things that are the identity of the fair, the commercial side. We also lean heavily into our identity as a foundation. I mentioned earlier, we're a not-for-profit foundation, and there are limited, that can lead to some limitations. We are charging exhibitors essentially what it costs to run the fair, but then we run a few initiatives that lean into that foundational side. So, one of the reasons why we are the destination for museums and museum patron groups around the world, we are often talked about as the museum art fair, which sometimes is good. Sometimes I also want to emphasize, the importance of private collectors. But we lean into that with our Museum Restoration Fund, our support for cultural emergency response. Both of those are things that we have been doing for quite a while, but also more recently leaning into setting up the curator course, inviting more museums to exhibit at the fair, put on exhibitions. We do the TEFAF Summit these days, which really emphasizes the importance of arts and culture and advocates for greater public and private partnership to invest more in arts and culture. We've just done an economic impact report that shows our impact on the Maastricht region and how we work with the city. So all of that coming together makes it very difficult to replicate. And when you come to have a conversation, for example, one of the most obvious realizations of this topic is when I'm trying to explain to a dealer why they should do TEFAF Maastricht or TEFAF New York. And I think there's a misunderstanding here. I think people sometimes assume that, for example, that you're trying to be, that you want them to be unsuccessful at other fairs so that they will come and do TEFAF, or vice versa, that feeds into it. And that's completely untrue. It's the total opposite. So what I need to explain to a gallery if they're considering, taking a serious financial investment, and we have to remember that what makes TEFAF different. And I think that leaning into that DNA really means that, we, after 39 years, we are, we're hopefully seeing the realization of that without having to permanently push it. It's something that happens quite naturally. So, yeah, that's at least how we think about it, and we hope that reflects and leads on to the clients for when they choose to come to the fair next year.
Yeah, I think TAFAF has a really unique identity within the art fair landscape, with the diversity of the art on view as well as the ambiance. It's one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites each year. So, TAFAF New York, I can't believe it. It's just around the corner in May. Can you perhaps give us a sneak peek, maybe share a few highlights or things you're most looking forward to at this year's edition?
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's coming up heavy. I mean, as I said to you before, I'm having lunch while I'm talking to you at 4:20 in the afternoon. But it's really, it's something that I think that it's really nice to talk about TEFAF New York within the context of Maastricht as well. I mean, they share the same sort of core DNA, placing artworks in dialogue across time, across mediums. And I think you can even say that replicates itself in the host cities themselves. Maastricht is a medieval host city. It's somewhere where you come and spend a couple of days, whereas New York is obviously concentrated, fast paced, and is sort of grounded in that context as well, even though it's more a modern and contemporary art and design fair. And I think, again, we've talked about it already, the importance of 20th century, that the balance, if you go through the whole fair, it is still sort of half and half between 20th and 21st century, which is unlike many modern and contemporary fairs. So it's fantastic to see, Hauser are coming back, Hauser and Wirth are coming back this year, Pace are coming back, Levy Gorby Diane, and then we also have a whole load of mainly 20th century galleries joining the fair in this sort of slow rotation that we have of galleries coming into the space. House actually have a fantastic Hammershoy exhibition coming. Larkin Erdmann, who's joining the fair, has a Man Ray presentation, which should be great to see. And now I've given those two a shout out. It's really unfair on the other 86 exhibitors, but I should probably stop. So, but yeah, it's going to be great with the audience, the dynamic audience that we have, collectors, curators, cultural figures coming in a couple of weeks, and it really complements everything that we're doing across both fairs and as a foundation.
Will, thanks so much again for coming onto the podcast and helping us recap this year's edition of TEFAF Maastricht, as well as preview your upcoming New York edition in May. We're looking forward to seeing you there. And if our listeners want to learn more about TEFAF or buy tickets, what's the best website they can visit?
www.tefaf.com. TEFAF.
Thanks again, Will. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam.